Hi, everybody. My name is Betty Roselle. I serve as the Director of College Counseling at Scranton Prep. Thanks for joining us tonight for a webinar on financing college costs. Our panelists for this evening are both colleagues of mine from my days back at the University of Scranton. Mary Kay Aston serves as the Associate Vice President for Financial Aid and Enrollment, and Mary Ellen Burns serves as the Associate Director of Financial Aid. I mean, you as parents already know we have such a strong relationship with the University of Scranton. But for these two women who are experts in the financial aid field to take time to give us an overview really of like FAFSA and financial aid scholarship information, we're just so very, very grateful to you for doing that. So I'm just going to turn it over to Mary Kay and Mary Ellen. I should say that we probably will address questions at the end. So if you want to write your questions in the chat, please feel free to do that. Mary Kay or Mary Ellen?
All right, so I'll hop in here. Thanks, Betty, for having us tonight. And as Betty said, we're going to give you a brief presentation, kind of a financial aid 101. Not specific to Scranton, but as you go through your college search process. So, we'll just give you some of the general information to start out with, and then any questions you have that we might not cover tonight, just type in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the program. So Mary Ellen and I are going to do this together. I'm going to cover the beginning slides, but if I seem to miss something or she wants to add, something that she thinks is important for you to know, she may chime in along the way. So Mary Ellen, do you want to say anything before we bring up the PowerPoint?
No, I'm just happy to be here. And like Mary Kay said, if you have any questions, feel free to just type them in the chat and we will address them after or during if we can. All right, let me share. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Okay. Is it coming through okay?
I could just see this stuff on the side. Can you just hit from the beginning?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing from the beginning on slide 1. It's on slideshow from the beginning.
The way I do it, I go all the way down to the bottom right, and that one that looks like a chart, let's say, over one more, over that one. Yeah, that looks like that's the presentation one. So if you click that, it should go to the first slide,
Yeah.
right? And then oh, did you click that bottom one on the right?
I did, this one.
Yeah, and it didn't show as presentation style.
Nope.
What if you go to view? Betty, you're going to share the link for the recording, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if you can't stay on for the whole time, you will get the recording later.
Okay, it should be slideshow and from the beginning, and you should get the full screen.
It didn't. All right, well, we may just have to take it from here for now.
It'll still work. We could still see it.
Yep. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Hold on. I don't really know what's going on. That normally does it, unless I stop sharing and put it on another one of my screens.
Try that.
Let me try that, guys. Sorry.
Technology is a wonderful tool when we know how to work it, right?
Oh, you know what? This is going to work.
Okay. There we go. All right.
All set?
We're all set. So welcome again. And Mary Ellen, you can just click through. So is it going to let you click through or not? Yep.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So if I tend to talk a little bit fast, can somebody just shoot a message in the chat? Sometimes I get ahead of myself. So a few things that we're going to talk about tonight is give you a brief overview of what financial aid actually is, what's meant by the cost of attendance, which you'll sometimes see referred to as COA. Financial aid folks love to use acronyms. So you're going to see alphabet soup from now until May 1st when you deposit. The expected family contribution, which is the EFC, financial need. We're going to talk about different categories and types and sources of financial aid because they come from different places. And we'll also talk about the free application for federal student aid, referred to as the FAFSA. So there are a couple different types of financial aid. And depending on how you receive your award notification, things can be referred to as gift aid. Gift aid is money or dollars that you don't have to pay back. It can come in the form of scholarships or grants, and they can come from either an institution, the federal government in terms of the grants, state government, or outside sources. So we'll touch upon that. And there are also what are referred to as self-help type aid. And that would encompass any loans that you take out or any work study jobs that your son or daughter may be offered. So how merit is awarded, or how aid is awarded. There are two different types of aid. The first is merit-based aid, and that typically comes from an institution. It can be based on academic ability, special talent or achievement, program of study, or your family background. It really is dependent on the type of institution you're applying to, and that sometimes is awarded at the time of admissions. Schools do it differently. They may do it at the time of acceptance. They may do it a little bit later on. There are also other merit-based awards that might not come directly from the institution, but through an application process. So we can talk about that a little bit later as well. And some of those are external merit-based programs, or also endowed programs that a college or university may have. Need-based aid is really determined by the financial need of the family. It can come from the federal government, the state government, or from institutional funds as well. So the sources of aid. So there's basically 5 different buckets. The first, I've mentioned federal government before. States also give financial aid, colleges and universities, private sources, or some employers also make contributions to a student's education. So factors that come into play in terms of the financial aid package. So again, we talked about academics, SATs. If you are submitting your SATs, I know that that's kind of the big question mark right now. The majority of schools, I believe, are still staying SAT optional. So it really is a student's preference in some cases, whether or not they submit their test scores. Class rank, what high school a student may attend, because different high schools may be ranked differently in terms of an application review process. The number of AP courses that a student takes. When the admissions teams are reviewing applications, they look at the AP or college level courses that a student is taking. It's not always determined by the score that they get on the AP exam. It's just the fact that they challenge themselves academically in the classroom. Some schools use a predicted GPA. There is a methodology where schools can take the rigor of a student's academic program, the high school they attend, if they give SATs to the college, and they can almost do a prediction as to what a student will do once they're in college. So at Scranton, we don't do that, but some schools may do that. So keep that in mind. Whether you're taking an academic track, whether you're taking a college prep course, that's also important in determining if the amount of the merit aid that a student might get. Diversity, gender, ethnicity, in order to keep things balanced, or not have things, how do I say this? In order to just increase the diversity across campus, for a lot of reasons, schools may package people a little bit differently. Athletic ability, some schools give athletic scholarships. So that's another part of your financial aid package. Any talent a student may have, theater, art, music, things like that, and activities. So, all college applications ask you for, I'll say your extracurriculars. So that can play a role in financial aid package as well. Geographical diversity and legacies. So, if you think about geographic diversity, it could be a public institution that is looking to enroll students from out of state. So that can play a role in your package as well. So institutional aid. Institutional aid really is the biggest source of aid for most private institutions. So it can come in different formats. It can be grants, scholarships, loans, employment, or discounts. Some colleges or universities also require an institutional application or other supplemental financial aid forms. So, later in the presentation, Mary Ellen's going to get into, the FAFSA, or the federal aid application, but different institutions may ask for additional information. Keep in mind that if a school asks for additional information, you'll still be required to file your FAFSA if you're looking for federal loans or federal money. Mary Ellen, do you want to say anything else about that one?
No, I actually think you covered everything. You just have to make sure that you contact each admissions office or financial aid office for all of the schools that you're putting on the FAFSA or that you're applying to make sure that you are meeting their deadlines and all the resources that they're asking for.
Okay, so deadlines and dates are very important. I'm just going to take an extra minute here to talk about this. So, we talk about the FAFSA. The FAFSA application opened on October 1st. It's, you don't have to have it in by October, 15th or October 30th. But as Mary Ellen said, pay attention to the dates that, colleges and universities are asking you to abide by. Typically in our case, we do financial aid packages in mid-January. There may be schools that you're applying to who will give you your total aid package maybe in December. So you might get it a little bit earlier. So, again, look at what other schools are requiring of you. Some people, they kind of wait a little bit longer, and, it's not a sense of urgency. You can file the FAFSA later, but as a Pennsylvania state resident, you really should get it in by May 1st. Because there are state grants that are available. And if you miss the deadline, you are not eligible for those funds. We run into students all the time, and it's like, we know they would qualify for the Pennsylvania state grant, and you ask, why don't they get it? Well, they didn't file on time.
Or they missed documents that maybe they were required to hand in by a certain time frame. So.
Okay. Right. I didn't finish up there, I don't think, did I? Okay. Each institution, as we talked about, they have different deadlines and things, but they also have different requirements, or we all offer our aid in a different way. So just because I'm going to make up a number here, just because you might get a $5,000 grant from us based on the FAFSA you filed, you may get $7,000 from another institution. You may get $3,000 from someone else. So every institution has a different way of awarding both their scholarships and their need-based aid. Again, make sure that you keep in touch with the admissions or financial aid offices at the institutions you're considering, just to make sure that you're on top of what you need to do. I'm gonna also add one statement here. I came to the financial aid office just recently, and I worked in the admissions office for 20 years. So one thing I want to say to parents, when you file the FAFSA, make sure that you have a good email on the FAFSA. Schools use that email address to communicate with parents. The other thing is, on the admission side, when your son and daughter is applying to college, make sure you put a usable address on there for yourself. I know that you receive a lot of, and for lack of a better term, junk emails from all of us. There are some very, very important ones that come through as well, particularly at the time of deadlines. So, you know, you'll get emails probably January, February, March, April, from either a financial aid office or admissions office. Kind of pay attention to them, because a lot of times there's deadlines in there or information relative to a financial aid package.
Ready?
Mhm.
For the next slide.
Okay, so, you know, we talk about the FAFSA, filing the FAFSA. You'll be reviewed for the federal Pell Grant. It's the largest, how do I say this, Mary Ellen?
Well, it's the foundation program of federal student aid. It's the largest federal grant program.
So in order to be eligible for that, you must file the FAFSA. Through filing of the FAFSA, they're going to do calculations on the data that you enter in that, or you can retrieve it from, Mary Ellen's going to go through the retrieval process later on. And what happens is they calculate a value, and it's the expected family contribution. That's going to determine your eligibility for the Pell Grant. If you file the FAFSA, again, you're going to see this EFC terminology, you know, every year until your son or daughter is done with college. And it is used for federal purposes. It's used for state grant purposes, and it is also used for any institutional need-based aid that you may be awarded. The award that you get in this grant is determined upon the enrollment status, whether you're full or part-time, and also on the cost of attendance of the institution you choose. The maximum award for the 2021-2022 academic year is $6,495. The other federal, well, two other federal programs that may be available is, this is a campus-based aid. So this dollar value that you receive is not determined by the federal government. It's the federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, and it goes to the neediest students. The government gives money to each institution that they can spend in SEOG funds, and the institution decides which students that are enrolled will get it and what the dollar value is. The other federal based program is campus-based, and this is the Federal Work-Study Program. So when your son or daughter gets their financial aid package, there's a chance that they can be offered federal work-study. And federal work-study is the amount of money that they can earn at a campus-based job. You know, you'll see it on the financial aid package, but it doesn't really come off your bill, if you will. The student receives a check. So it's kind of like they're spending money. They can earn wages to meet educational expenses. It can be they're spending money while they're at college. Typically, the guidelines are federal minimum wage. Here at Scranton, they get a little bump every year that they return to a position. They're required to be paid at least monthly. It can involve both on or off campus. And, you know, as I said, federal minimum wage is what we do here. Other institutions may offer differing wage rates, or sometimes even on campus here, depending on what the job responsibility is, the wage can be increased a little bit.
And I would just add that for students to qualify for federal work study on the FAFSA, there is a question if they would be interested in work study. So that has to be checked off. The other thing is if a student does get federal work study funds and they don't want to take advantage of them, or their schedule, you just want them in their first semester to get used to being a student and not take advantage of it, they don't have to apply for a job on campus just because they checked it off on the FAFSA. So that's up to their discretion, your discretion. And again, each school handles their work study program a little bit differently.
Okay, so the Pennsylvania State Grant facts. Again, this is just kind of reiterating what I already said. You must file the FAFSA in order to be eligible for the Pennsylvania State Grant, and you must apply before May 1st. Okay, and again, we can't stress this enough. Deadlines are extremely important. So, and you can see here, why we try to get students to apply using, the FAFSA. There's a $5,000 maximum for students who attend Pennsylvania schools, $600 maximum for the states listed here. Any other states, the grant doesn't go with them. So this is probably one of the most asked questions or most confusing topics for a lot of families. So this is the Stafford Loan program, and the students are eligible for these loans. Again, it all ties back to the FAFSA. So a first-year student is eligible to receive $5,500. The second-year student, $6,500. After that, $7,500, and graduate students, $20,500. So, excuse me. Two notes here on the slide. Loans can be either subsidized and or unsubsidized. Subsidized loans, the interest does not start accruing when they're dispersed. Unsubsidized loans, the interest is going to start accruing while a student is still in college. So that's a topic that students really don't understand all that well, and in some cases don't know the repercussions of it later on down the line. So that one you might have questions on, and if you do, we can address those a little at the end of the program. So independent students, graduate students, and some other students may be eligible for additional limits. So Mary Ellen, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
I think that, let's see, I think the best way to handle it is first go over the origination piece. Well,
Okay. Yep.
I'm talking about subsidized and unsubsidized loans, but maybe we can wrap it up after we go over the origination
Okay.
fees and the interest.
Okay. So this just explains a little bit about the interest rates and what happens. So the interest rates do change on a yearly basis. So obviously the ones that we have up here are current for the year we're in right now. So there's a fixed interest rate on subsidized loans and unsubbed of 3.73 until June of 2022. So when you take out a loan and prior to it being dispersed to a student's account, there is a loan origination fee. You can see here that it's 1.057. So a student may say, well, I borrowed X dollars, but I only got this amount. It's because of the origination fee. There is when students graduate from college, they do have a 6-month grace period in order to start the repayment process. Colleges and universities will take students through a loan counseling or an exit process so that they know what they need to do at that point. There are cases where deferments may be made available to students. Right now, I think students loans have been in deferment for a while because of the pandemic. Students who choose to not make their payments recently will be jumping back on those in the near future. And then just the loan and interest origination fees are, subject to congressional changes. So that is not an institutional decision, that's a government decision.
Okay, and then so to wrap up, the incoming freshmen receive $5,500, in the Stafford Loan Program. Some of that can be subsidized loans and some of it can be unsubsidized loans. It just depends on the estimated family contribution and the cost of attendance at that school. So whether students get the subsidized and at what level. But all freshmen are offered $5,500. Now, there are times when students can actually receive more in this Stafford Loan Program. And that would be if a parent was not on the FAFSA, if a student was independent, well, then they could qualify for more Stafford loans. Maybe a parent applied for a Parent Plus loan, which we'll cover in a little bit. And if they were not approved for the loan, well, then they have an option to give the student additional unsubsidized loans. So it's hard to explain, or maybe it's hard to understand. And if a situation warrants itself, definitely call the schools that the students are applying to and ask them if there's potential for more funds, if there was a plus loan issue, or if the student's independent. That's the best way to explain that.
You want to just hop right into this one, Mary Ellen?
Yep. So this is the plus loan. So a plus loan is another federal program, but it is a parent loan program. So when a student gets their financial aid package, because they completed, the Stafford loans are on the student's award letter. If a student has additional, we're going to get into the cost of attendance soon. The cost of attendance is the student's budget. If financial aid does not cover all of the expenses for the student, then they have money out of pocket that they would owe. A parent could borrow a federal loan, which is called the Parent Plus loan, and they could borrow the remaining balance or a portion of the balance in that loan. It's a federal loan and it's in the parent's name. There's a fixed interest rate to that loan. This year it's 6.28%. And the origination fee, like Mary Kay talked about, is 4.228. It's a little bit more for the Parent Plus loan, and they shave that off the top of the loan before disbursement. There's repayment terms to those loans. Again, it's in the parent's name. Some parents will say, okay, we'll take out the loan, but the loan is going to become the student's loan after they graduate. Well, that is fine. However, the loan will always be in the parent's name. In-student deferment means that if a school or if a student is in school, even getting their master's, the parents can defer that loan until after they graduate. Okay, Mary Kay.
You can keep going on, Mary Ellen.
Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about private sources of aid. Earlier, Mary Kay talked about private scholarships that are out there. We kind of threw this slide in here right in the middle just to explain to you that if you go out on the internet and you look at different scholarship opportunities or different private sources or scholarships, we want to make sure that you're looking at reputable sites. And here are 4 sites that are very reputable. And they have lots of different opportunities that students can apply to. If you are going out and a website is telling you, hey, if you pay $25, we will send you a list of scholarships that you can apply for, or we'll even apply for them for you, for your son or daughter. That's scary. Don't do that. This should all be free to you. So again, there's lots of opportunities for students to apply for scholarships outside, and these are some good sites to look at. Okay, this is where I was going to start my presentation, so I'm just going to pick up from here. Okay, the cost of attendance, we sort of talked about that. The cost of attendance is the budget that schools use, and it encompasses everything that makes up the charges for your son or daughter, tuition and fees, which can change from school to school. So the cost of attendance at each school is different. Room and board, if your student's going to be living on campus, books and supplies, transportation, personal expenses. Some students will have childcare expenses of their own. And if that's the case, that can be incorporated into the cost of attendance, and handicap expenses. Sometimes there's loan-related fees that schools can add to the cost of attendance. And why would they want to add some of these extra fees to the cost of attendance? Well, if they add that and the cost of attendance is more, then parents or students can borrow loans to cover those related fees. Okay, what is the expected family contribution? So we talk about this number, this formula that comes out of completing the FAFSA. And again, this calculation that the feds use, it's just so long if you were to see it on paper, but it's really comprised of two areas. There's a student contribution and a parent contribution. Once the calculations are done, it makes up, it's the measurement of the family's expected ability to pay for educational expenses. And I will just tell you, and we've done this in other presentations, the EFC that you hear that comes out of the FAFSA, most people say, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. It's just the calculations that the feds come up with. And we'll talk about some allowances that they will allow for in their calculations, and some things that you would hope they consider, but they don't. So determining factors in the EFC, the hard hitters are parental income, parental assets, but they do not account for your primary home. They're not asking for any information on that. Student income, student assets, family size, and the number of dependent children that you have in college, that really accounts for a lot in the calculations for the EFC, and the age of the older parent.
Mary Ellen, can I jump in here?
Yep.
And it's the dependents in college seeking an undergrad degree.
Right.
It's not students in grad school.
Okay, so these are the allowances that are built into the FAFSA calculations. Federal and state taxes that you pay are worked into that calculation and allotted for working parents, asset protection for your retirement, and standard living costs based on your family size. Now, things that are not taken into account in the FAFSA formulas are consumer debt, credit card debt, home equity loans, what debt you have out there, auto expenses, medical and dental expenses are not accounted in the FAFSA allowances, and neither are elementary, secondary tuition for younger siblings of the student that's applying for the FAFSA. Now, I will say that some schools will allow a professional judgment if you have out-of-pocket fees, let's say for medical or dental, that are just exorbitant. So you want to, if you think that may be your situation, and you have fees that you just couldn't help in 2020 or beyond, 2020 being the FAFSA year that you're filing, then you might want to talk to the schools that your son or daughter are applying for, because maybe there's a special condition or professional judgment that could be considered. Okay, so now we're going to give examples of an expected family contribution and how things can change. So let's take a family of 4. And of that family of 4, 1 is going into college, the student who's filling out the FAFSA. Well, there's a parent contribution portion, like I talked about. And let's say that formula calculated out to be $30,000, that the parent contribution of the EFC. Now, the student's portion, the student's contribution calculated out to be $1,000. So that total family contribution, or EFC, would be $31,000. Now, let's say that family is a family of 6, and they're going to have 3 in college next year. Well, first of all, God bless them. and we've had it. We've had parents that apply and they have triplets coming in, or just 3 in college. Well, the parent's contribution is, again, $30,000, but we want you to see that because that contribution is $30,000, it's not going to be $30,000 for each child. It's going to be distributed amongst the 3 kids that are going to be at college. So it becomes $10,000 per child. The student's contribution could be different for each of those children. Maybe one worked and had a savings, and maybe one did not work and didn't have much of a savings. So their contributions ended up being $1,000, $5,000, or 0. Well, as you can see, the total family contributions, or the EFC, for those 3 kids is different. So we will have people that say, I have triplets or I have twins, and their EFC should be the same. They can be slightly different because of the student's contribution. Okay, another slide that we threw in here. We want you to know about the net price calculator. Every school has to have a net price calculator on their website. And the net price calculator is, it's a calculator that we can use a federal calculator. We can use a private company's calculator that is tailored to our aid, or we can use our own calculator that we built. But what it does, once you plug in the correct figures, basically the FAFSA figures that you're giving, it's just an abbreviation of the EFC, and it's non-binding because it's not going to be your exact EFC, but it sometimes is pretty close. So we encourage you to use the net price calculator at all the schools that your kids are applying to, but we don't want it to discourage you from applying and then applying for federal aid as well. Mary Kay, do you have anything that you need to add on this?
I just want to add that when you use the school's net price calculator, many times the aid estimates are based on the previous year. So it's not exactly what you're going to get this year. Sometimes it's going to be, you'll get more as schools, change their awarding strategies. It's rare if you'll get less, but just keep in mind, it's a ballpark figure.
A guide. Okay, so now let's get into the FAFSA. So the FAFSA for your senior son or daughter is going to be for the academic year 2022-2023. And when you complete the FAFSA, it goes back using, FAFSA opened up October 1st. But when you complete the FAFSA, you're going to use tax information from 2020. And you're going to use current year savings and investment data as of the date that you completed the FAFSA. Now, we strongly, can't say it enough, urge you to use the data retrieval tool if you can. The data retrieval tool is the IRS's ability. It's the tool that they built into the FAFSA so that you can give them permission to upload your tax information into your FAFSA so that it cuts down on any mistakes or errors, and it's very safe now. So we urge you to use the data retrieval tool. The other thing, because without it, schools may be asking for additional, if you're applying to 10 schools, additional information, tax information via forms. We're going to get into all that on another slide. And this last bullet is telling you that the FAFSA can be filed by app. And there's a new way to file the FAFSA, and it's via a cell phone. Some kids may want to do this. And what we're saying is you could use the data retrieval tool on the cell phone app as well. Okay, here are all the ways that you can complete the FAFSA. The most popular is on the web, and that's using your computer, your desktop, your laptop. The mobile app, again, that's a newer function, but you can complete the FAFSA on your phone. There is a paper FAFSA for those who can't file on the web or on the phone. However, not many people use paper, and what happens with paper is you're filling in the FAFSA application, and then when you give the paper to the schools or to the feds, that paper application is added to the last bullet, the CPS online. There could be errors on your part accidentally and errors on the input as well. So if you don't have to use paper, don't. And then also FAFSA on the phone, where you dial in. I've never heard, excuse me, of anybody doing this, but I guess it's an option. Okay, again, all about the data retrieval tool because schools strongly urge you to use it. So it allows for certain tax return information to be transferred from the IRS database. Participation is voluntary, and students choose whether or not to transfer the data via the web. It authenticates the taxpayer's identity. So the other thing that we will strongly urge is make sure that when the FAFSA is asking for the student's social security number, you're putting those numbers in correctly and you're double checking them. When it's asking for parents' social security numbers, you want to do the same thing. Double check, triple check. They are common errors on the FAFSA. And for data retrieval purposes, if they're wrong, you're not going to be able to upload the data. If the IRS cannot authenticate your social security number and match it to your IRS information, they won't allow the data retrieval to go through. We talked about less mistakes if you use the data retrieval. The one thing I will tell you though is once you use the data retrieval for your protection, the information on the FAFSA is masked. So you're giving permission for the IRS to transfer information to the FAFSA. You won't be able to see that information. Those numbers are masked. That's for your protection. Who cannot use a data retrieval tool? One thing that's not listed on here is if you recently moved and the IRS has a different address than what's on the FAFSA, you may not be able to upload the data into the FAFSA. But also, if you indicated on the FAFSA that you didn't file a tax return, well then the FAFSA is not even going to look for a data retrieval. If you were married in January of 2020 or later, then your tax information is different. You can't use the retrieval tool. First 3 digits of the social security number are 666. Can't use it. If you filed a non-US tax return, then our federal data would not be retrieved. And for these other purposes, married and filed head of household. So if you and your spouse are married and you both filed individually, then you can't use the data retrieval tool because the FAFSA is asking you in that instance to add up the data on both of your tax returns. And so the IRS data retrieval tool would not do that. And then if neither married parent enters a social security number, or if the social security number entered is all zeros, then the data retrieval would not go through. Let's talk about special conditions. So you've completed the FAFSA, you've received your financial aid award notification. First, the students accept it, and then they've received their financial aid award notification. Your FAFSA was based on 2020 information, and 2021 or 2022, depending on how the school handles their special condition, there's just a change, and we can go over the possible changes in the next slide. But you think you have a special condition. There's a circumstance that you want to let every school know about. Please do that, because we are all looking to see if there's any differences between what you entered on the FAFSA and what's going on in real life now, current day, so that we can see if there's anything that we can do to help out, to maybe provide additional assistance in that upcoming year. Not every school does special conditions, but a lot of schools do, and it doesn't hurt to ask. If you can supply a special circumstance, what schools will do is ask you to explain it in writing, maybe fill out a form that they have, and supply documents that they ask for. Okay, here are some special circumstances, maybe loss of employment, maybe unfortunate parent or spouse death, uncovered medical or dental expenses like I had covered in one of the previous slides. If you had medical or dental expenses that were not covered by your insurance, then there would be a Schedule A that schools are looking for on your tax return. And there's also formulas that the school may have for you. You would supply that information and they would see if they could help. If there's been a divorce situation since filing the FAFSA, that would be a special condition that we could help you with. If there's a divorce situation from prior to 2020 or early in 2020 and the parent filed jointly, the FAFSA has bubbles to it. So as you're being asked questions, you can search on the bubble and you can give your circumstance and they will tell you how to answer that. However, If you want, you can call the schools and ask them. We are always here to help. Every school's financial aid office knows how antiquated this process is, how tough, and that's what we're here for. We're here to help you get through it. So don't ever feel funny about calling a school and asking about, how do I answer this one question? How do I talk to you about a special condition? What forms would you be looking for in this situation? So these are all situations here where that would warrant a special condition. Okay, common FAFSA application errors: using an incorrect student or parent social security number, reporting a name incorrectly. So you want to go off of what is listed on social security cards. Reporting cents. So the FAFSA asks you in every question to round up to the nearest dollar. They're not asking you to just ballpark a figure. They really want accurate figures, but they want you to round to the next dollar. Misreporting an amount for federal taxes paid. It's confusing. If you're not using the data retrieval tool, the tax questions can be confusing. And what they're asking for is, what are your taxes paid, not what was withheld. So people do make mistakes. We can help correct the mistakes. The data retrieval tool takes away the mistakes, the possibility for those errors. But we do want you to know, if you haven't completed the FAFSA, to use the taxes paid. Neglecting to report all applicant and parent assets. Okay, so the FAFSA is only as good as the information that you're plugging in. Some people forget to add certain things to the FAFSA. It happens. Schools may be asking you for verification documentation, whether the Department of Ed selects you for verification, selects that FAFSA for verification, or the school selects that FAFSA for verification. They might be asking for forms that will confirm what the true answer is and make sure that you answered that correctly. So some people neglect to put all of the information that's asked on there, and so the EFC could be wrong. And then as a school is verifying, they could make those corrections, change that EFC, which could in turn change some information on the some offerings on the award package, or it could warrant additional aid. So we just want to make sure you try and get all the accurate information into the FAFSA from the get-go. Again, the hard hitters are the number in the household and the number in college. So you want to make sure that you answer those questions correctly on the FAFSA from the beginning. So what to expect after you file the FAFSA? Well, first of all, you'll be relieved when it's done and you hit submit. That's the first thing. But afterwards, you're going to receive in the next couple of days an email from Federal Student Aid, and they will be sending you a summary of the FAFSA. The summary is called a SAR, or a Student Aid Report, and it contains all of the data from your FAFSA, but the IRS information would be masked if you use the data retrieval tool. It'll contain the EFC that's going to go out to all schools so that they can award packages. Possible requests from schools may come at a little bit later date. Again, they may be looking for additional data so that they understand the answers that you gave on the FAFSA. They may be looking for verification of certain data, so they may be asking for some forms. It's also saying here the financial aid determination. So what they're saying here is that after you complete the FAFSA and after the student is accepted at universities, then expect the award notifications to come in. And then if you did complete the FAFSA at the very end, because you live in Pennsylvania, what will pop up is the opportunity to fill out the PA state grant form, application form. If you ignore that form from the get-go, then they may get back to you and say, hey, you didn't request or you didn't fill out FIA. So there's a request for that form, or if you did fill it out, there's a request for additional information. Okay, do you have anything to add here?
Nope, I think you covered it all.
Okay. All right, we are at the point where you can ask questions or we can see, are there any questions here?
No?
Wow,
Can I ask a question?
sure.
And then also comment. So you mentioned if a family's filling out the FAFSA this year, it's based on the 2020 tax return. So let's say in 2021, there were some negative impact from the pandemic and it affected their income. Would that fall under special consideration and they should notify an individual school about that?
Yeah, yep. So unfortunately, the pandemic is gonna bring about some situations for a lot of people. So every school handles special conditions differently.
Yeah.
The University of Scranton will look at, so you complete the FAFSA using 2020 data. However, the way we handle our special conditions is we say, if 2022, the year that the student is coming in, is going to be different than 2020, the year that they completed the FAFSA, that's when there's a special condition. Now, other schools may say, okay, 2020 was the FAFSA year, but we're doing special conditions based on 2021. So every school does it differently. So if I would suggest, and maybe Mary Kay can jump in, I would suggest that if there is a situation like that because of the pandemic, contact the schools that the student is applying to. Do you have anything to add there, Mary Kay?
No, I think you covered it. We do have a question in the Q&A. So is it better than to emancipate a child, and how does the process handle step parents?
So it is very, very difficult to emancipate a child. A lot of people have tried this and maybe years ago succeeded, but the feds have gotten very, very wise to this. If a child is living with the parents, there's no way to emancipate them. It's a legal procedure, and it's not one that can be started now for next year. And so I would say no, unless there's a real reason that warrants emancipation, it won't go through. As far as a step parent, so let's talk about that. If parents are divorced and they're filling out the FAFSA, the custodial parent is by definition the parent that the student lives with 51% of their time and also supplies 51% of student expenses or covers student expenses. That is the custodial parent. It's not the parent who claimed the student on their taxes, because parents may share in that. One year it may be the father and one year it may be the mother. It's the true custodial parent. And the definition is on the FAFSA when you complete that. If a parent is a custodial parent and they are remarried, then that step parent's wages are accounted for on the FAFSA. Their FAFSA asks for their information. Even if they were not married in 2020, but have been married since. So 2020 income on the FAFSA, the parent gets married in 2021, that step parent has to supply their 2020 income on the FAFSA, income information and tax information. Does that make sense? Did I cover that?
Mhm. I wanted to just add, you were talking about scholarships earlier, and I just wanted the parents to know that what our office does is each month we send an email to the students with a list of scholarships, be it national, regional, or state, local scholarships for that month with the deadlines that are due that month. So we don't give them like a massive list. We give them a list each month based on the ones that they were due. So parents, encourage your students to apply for as many as are appropriate for that student.
That's awesome.
So Betty, I'm going to piggyback on that and go back to my comment about paying attention to emails. You know, oftentimes after our financial aid packages go out in the spring, we'll send emails to students saying, you know, we have, you know, these scholarships for, local students, because, and we'll ask them to write a short essay to be considered for whatever scholarship. There are times, we may have 3 or 4 scholarships to give out, and we might get 2 applications. I don't know why. But again, pay attention. We try to email the students and the parents to let them both know they're available. But again, I know it's tough because you get a lot of emails and you don't know, which ones you need to read. But certain times of the year, particularly, like I said, after February, you might want to, scan them a little bit more carefully.
Any more questions? Well, I guess we'll just wrap it up. Mary Kay and Mary Ellen, I cannot thank you enough for doing this. The 2 of you have such a nice, easy way about you, and it's just such a stressful topic. So thank you for your style of presenting. You make such hard information more digestible, let's say. So thank you again. And parents, thank you. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for the technology issues.
No worries.
All right.